Hey, hello, League Orlando. Today we are going to talk about the character of the contemporary history of the United States. And to start with, I'm going to talk about Thomas Jefferson. Can you pass the next slide, please, Gabi? Okay, who was Thomas Jefferson? He was a spokesman for democracy, was an American founding father. He was the principal author of the Declaration of Independence in 1676, and the third president of the United States from 1801 till 1809. He was born on April 13, sorry, 1743 of the Chadwell plantation located just outside of the Charlottesville, Virginia. His mother was James Radford Jefferson, who was a member of the proud Radford clan. It was like a family claiming descent from English and Scottish royalty. And his father was Peter Jefferson, who was a successful farmer as well as a skilled assessor of and, and cartographer who produced the first accurate map of the province of Virginia. As a boy, Jefferson's hobbies were playing in the woods, practicing the violin, and reading. He began his formal education at the age of 9, studying Latin and Greek at a local private school run by the Reverend William Douglas. In 1757, 1757, sorry, um, at the age of 14, he took off further study of the classical language as well as literature and mathematics with the Reverend James Maury. Um, Also in 1660, he left home to attend college. Um, it was William and Mary College in Williamsburg, Virginia capital, and he became one of the most earned lawyers in America. Also from 1967 to 1674, Jefferson practiced law in Virginia with great success, trying many cases and winning most of them. During these years, he also met and fell in love with Martha Wayles, who was one of the wealthiest women in Virginia. They got married on January the 1st, 1772, and they had 6 children together, but only 2 of them survived into adulthood. It was Martha, the firstborn, and Mary, that was their fourth. Can you pass the next slide, please? Okay, and to continue with important events, as I mentioned before, he was born in 1743 in Chadwell, Virginia. In June 1776, he graduated with the Declaration of Independence. Also in 1779, he became governor of Virginia, and in 1785, he replaced Benjamin Franklin as USA Minister to France. In November 1789, he arrived in Virginia to find that George Washington was waiting for him with the good news that Washington had been elected for president of the United States of America, and that he was hiring Jefferson as his Secretary of State. And in 1696, Jefferson was elected vice president under President John Adams. Also, in the presidential election of 8, 18, he was elected president. And in 1803, Jefferson's most significant accomplishment as a president was the Louisiana Purchase. And in 1809, Jefferson retires after his second term. And in Jefferson died on July 4, 1826. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Damaris Abigail Castillo Abrego, and I'm going to continue talking about Thomas Jefferson. So here have 10 interesting facts about the Thomas Jefferson. And the first one is Thomas Jefferson. I really like books. And after his retirement, sold his library of 6,500 volumes of the Library of Congress after it was uh, ransackled by the British. And the other one is The Economist. Um, Jefferson was deeply engaged in economic theory, which he learned to love during his time in France. And the other is The Architect. He designed the rotunda for the University of Virginia, his old home at Monticello, and the Virginia the state capital in Richmond. And the other is The Food Lover. And on his return from France, Jefferson brought in his love of that nation's cuisine back with him. And the other is The Wind Snow. Yes, Jefferson brought his love of French went back to America too. He had to vineyard at Monticello as knowledge as a great wine expert of early America. The other is The Agriculturalist. He was one of the first American farmers to employ crop rotation and designed the plow to make it efficient. And the other is the paleontologist. He was also obsessed with fossils, and Jefferson's raised the profile of paleontology as a president, and he has a mammoth named after him. And the other is The Astronomer. And Jefferson loved stargazing almost as much as he liked books, and he made sure astronomy was taught at the University of Virginia, and he designed what may have been the first observatory in the United States. And the other is the writer. He was a prolific writer, and during her lifetime, and with his authorship of the Declaration of Independence and the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom included in his epic. And the last but not the least, the musician. He took violin lesson as a child and played with the violin as he courted his wife, his future wife, and Martha Skelton. And the next slide, please. And also, I'm going to talk about the most important and the very important reason so Thomas Jefferson was very important and for many reasons. And an early advocate of total separation of church and state. He also was the founder and architect of the University of Virginia and the most eloquent American proponent of individual freedom as the core and meaning of the American Revolution, and also a long reward as Americans' most disgusting apostle of the liberty. Jefferson has come under increasingly critical scrutiny within the scholarly world. The popular lever both the United States and abroad. Also, he remains incandescent icon and an inspirational symbol for both major U.S. and political parties, part as well as for dissenters in communist China, library reforms in the Central and the Earnest Europe, and spreading democracy in Africa and Latin America. So thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Eugenia Vasquez Duran. The second character we are going to talk about is Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15th in 1929, and he died on April the 4th, 1968. He lived for 39 years. And well, he basically was an American Baptist minister and activist who became one of the most visible spokesmen and leader as well in the American civil rights movement. This happened from 1955 until his assassination. He was killed by gunshot, and this happened in 1968. Martin Luther King made a lot of improvements in civil rights through nonviolence and civil disobedience. He was mainly inspired by his Christian beliefs. As I mentioned, he was an American Baptist minister, and he was also very inspired by nonviolence activism of Mahatma Gandhi. Now, Martin Luther King, he participated a lot and led as well many marches for Black rights. Uh, he wanted for Black people to be able to vote, for desegregation, labor rights, and other basic civil rights. He won the Nobel Peace Prize. This was in 1964, like 4 years before he was shot. And basically, he won this prize for combating racial inequality through the nonviolence resistance. There is a memorial for Martin Luther King. This is located in West Potomac Park. This is in Washington, D.C., the United States. And it's called the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. This park covers around 4 acres and includes the Stone of Hope. This is a granite statue of him. And well, this park was basically inspired in his famous speech, which was called I Have a Dream. This park opened in August 2011, and basically it took around 2 decades for it to be constructed. Thank you.
Natalie sigue.
Okay, good afternoon, teacher. I'm going to continue talking about Martin Luther King. And in the early 1960s, several revolts related to the so-called race question took place in the United States. Despite the enactment of several anti-segregationist laws, the Black community did not enjoy the recognition deserved, and the institutionalized racism persists in some parts of the country. From that moment on, demonstrations and political activist organizations sprang up in defense of civil rights and against Jim Crow's laws enacted by white legislators across the United States from San Francisco to New York on August 28th. In 1963, and more than 2,000 people gathered in a march for freedom and jobs that took the streets of Washington. Luther King broadcasting "I Have a Dream" as or or classmate mentioned was undoubtedly a decisive moment in history, a date on which took place one of the most sublime and transcendent political speeches in the history of the United States, and the peaceful struggle, a moment, moreover, that has not lost its force and the eloquent power. In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act prohibiting discrimination in employment, public accommodations, and other aspects of life. King attended the signing of the law and in the same year received the Nobel Peace Prize. During the ensuing years, they continued to press for a law to ensure that blacks could not be denied the right to vote by discriminatory practices, such as literacy tests. And in 1965, Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act in the Voting Rights Act, and at the last, in a posthumously published essay entitled "A Testimony of Hope," King urged Black Americans to continue their commitment to nonviolence, but also warned that the justice for Blacks cannot be achieved without radical changes in the structures of the society.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gabriela Cornejo, and today I'm going to continue to talk about Luther Martin Luther King. Okay, during the less than 30 years old of Dr. Martin Luther King, leadership of the modern American civil rights movement from December 1955 until April 4, 1968, African American achieved more genius progress toward racial equality in America than the previous 350 years had produced. Dr. King is widely regarded as American preeminent advocate of nonviolence and one of the greatest nonviolence leaders in world history. Drawing inspiration from both his Christian faith and the faithful teaching of Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. King led the nonviolence movement in the late 1950s and the 60s to achieve legal equality for African Americans in the United States, while others were advocating for freedom by any means necessary, including violence. Martin Luther King Jr. used the power of the word and acts of the nonviolent resistance, such as protests, grassroots organization, and civil disobedience to achieve seemingly impossible goals. He went on to lead similar campaigns against poverty and international conflict, always maintaining fidelity to his principle that men and women everywhere, regardless of color or creed, are equal members of the human family. Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech, Nobel Peace Prize lecture, and letter from Birmingham Gales are among of the most revered oration and writings in the English languages. His accomplishments are now taught to American children of the old race, and his teachings are students by scholars and students worldwide. He is the only non-president to have a national holiday dedicated in his honor, and is the only non-president memorizing of the Great Mall in the national capital. He is memorizing in the hundreds of the statues, park, street, square, church, and other public facilities around the world as a leader whose teachings are increasingly relevant to the progress of the humankind. Thank you.
Okay, licenciado, this was all from us. By the way, my name is Catherine Melissa Maldonado Reyes. Sorry that I forgot to mention my name at the beginning of the presentation.
And my name is Natalie Coralia Zabaleta Pineda. Thanks for your attention, teacher, and that's it.